back to my channel, Viseart. Today, I will be doing an eyeshadow ranking video. I'll be ranking all these eyeshadows by brand, however. I will be ranking my Natasha Denona Viseart ABH Huda Beauty, Charlotte Tilbury, Marc Jacobs, and my e.l.f. eyeshadow palettes. Do keep on watching. Here are my Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes. I have a total of 8 of them. I started out by collecting all these minis, and after that, then I venture into these bigger palettes. So my number one Natasha Denona eyeshadow palette will be Zendo. Because this palette is actually very wearable, I'm quite surprised that I placed this higher than all the other Natasha Denona eyeshadows. But I find myself reaching out for this Zendo palette very often. It is very easy to wear. I've already deposited all these shades into the mini palette over here. So this is the warm part of the palette. This shade is actually not in the Zendo eyeshadow palette. I took this from the Glam palette. So I took one shade out from the Glam palette to put here. So I have a lighter shade to put at the inner corner of my eyelid. And the other part of the palette is actually over here. This is the cool part of the palette. It's a very beautiful blue and green palette. So I find that by separating them into two palettes, I get a lot of use out of them because I don't need to think about a look every single time. I can just easily get one of them, either a cool one or warm one, and create a look very quickly. So this is my number one Natasha Denona palette. Number 2 in the ranking is this Circle Logo palette. This palette has very beautiful and vibrant colors for me to play with, and I find the shadows are really of a very good quality. I love the snow cone especially, and Aerialis is really very beautiful in the eye. So this is in the second place. Up next, we have the Natasha Denona Glam palette. This is a very wearable palette, and as you can see, I'm missing 5 shades over here because I actually deposited out 5 shades to put in my little palette for travel wise if I'm traveling with my palette. So I actually took up 4 shades and placed it over here in my Makeup Forever palette, and the other shade was mentioned just now. It is in my other palette over here, Midi Zendo. So this is the shade over here. So by taking out all the 5 shades, I'm left with all these shades. I actually find it easier to work with lesser shades because I don't need to think about which look should I use. I will just use this to darken out the outer corner of my lid, and then pop a lighter color, a shiny color, either at the inner corner or at the center part of my eyelid. And I just use this color or this on my crease. So it becomes easier for me to wear this palette because I have lesser choice to think about. So this is my third palette for Natasha Denona. Number 4, I have this Coral palette. This is a bigger 5-pan palette. This shade is really pretty on the center part of the lid, and you just need to pop this at the inner corner and darken out the outer corner with either of these shades. You get a very nice corally look with a nice pop of purplish silver shimmer at the center part of the lid. So this is really pretty. I really like this a lot. Next up will be the rest of her minis. So the next mini that I have is Mini Gold palette. Now I really like green shadows, and especially this kind of khaki green kind of eyeshadows. This is really a stunning palette. very easy, very wearable. It looks very pretty on the eye. So I wear this much more than the other minis. So this one comes up at the top of all the minis. The next mini that I have will be Mini Retro. Mini Retro is really pretty. It has a more smokier effect when you place these colors, and then you pop this at the center part of the lid. You have a very nice, easy, gentle, smoky eye with this palette. These colors are really gorgeous, and what attracts me to this palette is actually the pink packaging over here. This is a very pretty palette. This is actually the first mini palette that I bought. The next mini palette I have is one of her newer releases during the Valentine's Day. This is the Mini E.l.f palette. Now the reason this is not ranked as high as the other minis is because I find that this shade just looks more monochromatic. It's just a pink eye. I think that the shimmers are not that sparkly enough to create a very different look. So I just in general get a very pink look. And I have lots of pink palettes, especially from the mcgrath. So that's why this is ranked a bit lower, because it's not as pretty as my other pink palettes, and I don't get much use out of this. And the last mini palette will be Mini Tropic. I got this at a sale actually, so that's why I bought this palette. This palette is not as wearable as the other minis. The colors are very bright, so it's not so easy to wear for work. That's why it is ranked at the last. But as you can see, this shimmer is really pretty. So sometimes I just use this shade alone at the center part of the lid to pair with other palettes. So this is much more of a pairing palette for the shimmer shades. And this is ranked at the last. Next up will be my Viseart eyeshadow palettes. I have a total of 3 of them. So a fun fact, I actually got the inspiration for my channel name, Viseart, through this name Viseart. So it rhymes, right? Yeah. So this is the first palette that I will choose out of these 3. This is the Petite palette in Solstice. These colors are actually very nice, pigmented. It creates a very orangey look. This shade over here is really pigmented. When I apply it on my inner corner of my lid, wow, it's really pigmented and comes off very strongly and shiny. So really be careful while picking this shadow up. And this shade over here, it has a shift, a purple kind of shift, and it looks extra gorgeous when you place it at the center part of your lid. So this is really gorgeous. So in general, this palette is really very wearable, you can see. So I tend to pick this palette up more, and that's why this is ranked number 1. Next up, we have the Dark Edit. This is a slightly bigger version of these 2 over here. So these shades over here are more of a grungier colors. There are a lot of shades you can choose. You can create a lot of different looks. So you have a green kind of look, or purplish kind of look, purplish pinkish, orangey, yellowish. Yeah, so you can create a lot of looks. And this palette, however, is ranked at number 2 because I find myself not reaching for this as much as the first one, because I really need to think of which look should I use, and sometimes I'm in a hurry, I just want to quickly get a look out, and that's why this is ranked at number 2. But the colors are really very nice and pigmented. Very nice shadow. And number 3 will be this palette in Midsummer. This is a new palette I just bought, and I just wore this palette today actually, and the shades are really not as pigmented, so I really need to dip into my brush quite a few times to get some pigment out of it. And the shinier shade over here, I actually can't really get much of a color out of this. I used a brush initially, and then the color wasn't picking up, and then after that I went in to use my finger to pick it up, but still the color isn't that shiny, the look isn't that complete, the look looks quite muted, and for me I like more of a more dramatic look. Yeah, so this isn't the palette I will pick up. If you want to pick up, I will suggest you to pick up this Solstice instead. This is really nice shadow formula and nice color story is very nice. So these are my ranking of my 3 Viseart palettes. Next up, we have the ABH palettes. So I actually bought this Breezy palette first because of its packaging. The pink glittery packaging is what attracts me. And then after that I bought this Novena palette because the purpley shade inside is really stunning. And this is actually my newest purchase. So in my local Sephora, this stock coming quite late, so I actually just saw that this palette was in stock and quickly grabbed it. So I only have it for about a week. So the first ABH palette in my ranking will be the Novena palette. This is a very gorgeous palette. I find myself gravitating towards this because the purplish shades are really stunning. You can create either a purplish look or a brown look. A very easy wearable palette. It looks really feminine in the eye. So this is my favorite palette. And the next palette, I find myself using this Carly Bible palette. It's very stunning. At first I thought all these texture were raised, but actually it's just a flat surface. So it just has a 3D kind of look. It's really stunning, the design. Inside of the palette, these are how the shade looks like. Very stunning, purpley shades. So actually I don't find this as pigmented, but you can get more pigmented looks by using your finger to get the shades. So I usually go for this shade over here. I really like this purplish glitter shade at the center of the lid. It looks gorgeous. And this here, the color has a pink and purplish shift, also really gorgeous. Yeah, so this is a very gorgeous palette as well. It's actually more of a similar color story to Novena, I find, but it's a more shimmery color story. Yeah, so this is the second palette. And the third one, the Breezy palette. Wow, these shades are really stunning. However, I find that I'm not using this palette as much. Yeah, because I don't know, especially although this blue really catches my eye, but I find it really hard to get a look out of this. And I don't really like the glitters. I don't really use glitters at my eye. So, and these two colors are a bit too similar. It's also quite dark at the eye. So I just go to the pink shades in this palette. So that's why I find myself not getting as much use out of this palette, although it looks really vibrant and pretty. But it's just not as wearable as the other two, in my opinion. So this is number 3. Here are my Huda Beauty eyeshadow palettes. So I have 4 of them. And the very first one, of course, will be this Mercury Retrograde. So this is actually the very first high-end palette I've gotten, and after getting this palette, I start to venture more into different kind of eyeshadows, and that's how I started to keep my collection growing. So let me show you the inside of the palette. So this is how the palette looks like. This is totally me in the palette. It's so pretty, so gorgeous. This shade is super stunning. It's Nebula. I find myself reaching out to this shade a lot. And this shade over here, the purplish look, is also very cute. And this seafoam kind of shade is my favorite. So I really love this palette a lot, but somehow I just didn't get to use a lot of this because I have lots of amazing eyeshadows like Natasha Denona and mcgrath that I reach out for more. Somehow I will try to use this palette more. It's really very gorgeous. Pastel-y colors. I really love this palette. Next up will be the Huda Nude Light palette. So I bought this because I thought this is more of like a mini version of the Mercury retrograde. It has sort of a similar color story. The purplish pinkish tones is super gorgeous too, but I find that the formula is not as good as the Mercury retrograde. So I don't really reach out to this palette a lot also. I'm trying to see how I can pen this eyeshadow palette actually. Yeah, but I don't really get a lot of use out of it. Sometimes I just dig into this shade for the center part of the lid, or this to create a shinier look, but in general I don't really use this. I hope I'll get more use out of this palette. It's really pretty. My next Huda palette will be the Neon Pink palette. I believe this palette is already out of stock in my local Sephora. Look at these shades. This is what catches my eye. And I got this on a discount actually. So this palette is not as wearable. I use this palette I think only once. I put this in my crease and I think it's too loud a look for me. Yeah, and mostly I'm working. I hardly have time to go out, especially now COVID-19. So I don't really use this palette a lot. But look at these shades. I'm really hoping to use these shades as toppers to other eyeshadow palettes. It's really a very pretty palette. And the last one is the Pastel Mint palette. So this is the palette that I use the least. I got this on a sale too. These shades are really very light and there's hardly any pigmentation. You really have to dig into the shade. But I really like this swirly blue shade, shiny shade over here. It's gorgeous as a lid topper. I think these two looks roughly the same, not much of a difference. And all these looks a bit light. I think this is more pigmented compared to this as a crease color. So this is really one of my least used palette. So these are my ranking for my Huda Beauty palettes. Next up is my Charlotte Tilbury palettes. So I have 3 of them. So the first palette I have here, this is the Exaggerize. So this palette, at first when I bought it I was really kind of disappointed because I find that it doesn't really look very pigmented and it looks kind of boring to me. But recently when I try to use it again, I really find myself loving this. It really just enhanced my eye. And this glittery shade here actually has a little bit of hard pan. So I try to dig into this shade using my little finger and maybe a sponge tip. Yeah, so this one is easily hard pan. But the rest of the shade, this shade is very gorgeous. It really helps to deepen up your crease, creating a very nice look. And this shimmery metallic look here is very nice formula. So this is a very easy, gentle, wearable look, very suitable for work. So this is my number one palette. My second palette is this. This is an older collection. This is the Starry Eyes to Hypnotize. This is how it looks like. These 6 shades here are really very gorgeous. You can easily deepen up the look using these darker colors, and the rest of the look just brightens up your eye. Very nice color. These shades here also creates a very cool look. I just don't really reach out to this palette a lot because usually I like a more dramatic look. I'll reach out more to my Pat McGrath or my Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes. I really need to give this palette more love. So this is the second one. As for my third palette, this is the Uptown Girl. I like these greyish tones. And same thing for this shade here. It is hard pan already. I try to use my little finger to dig into this shade. But it isn't as pigmented also. I really need to dig quite hard into this shade to get some pigment out of this. But in general, it creates a very nice smoky look. It's just one palette that I don't really use as much. So this is my third palette. Next up, we have 2 palettes from Marc Jacobs. I bought this palette first. It was on sale. I really like this packaging. It's super stunning. And then after that, I bought this when this was on sale as well. So this is the number one out of these 2 palettes if I were to rank them. So this is the palette in Scandalust. It is really a very easy to wear shade. Just pop all these lighter colors in the crease. This to darken the crease also. And the outer corner of the lid by adding this shade over here. And then simply pop this shinier shade at the center part of the lid and in the inner corner of the lid as well. You really get a very nice gradient, a very nice look, very easy to wear. So I really like this palette. The next palette, I do not really use it as much, and unfortunately that is so because when I got this palette, see here the chip part, this black was chipped when I received it, and this black color actually goes into all the other shadows. I have a very hard time cleaning out all the black specks from all these other shades. So somehow I just find that every time I place one of these colors, it will just have a very dark black base to it. I don't know whether is it naturally this palette is designed to be like that, or is it because of the black specks that goes into these 3 colors. So unfortunately, this is why I don't really use this as much. But I saw reviews from other YouTubers. They really like this palette, and these gold shades really look very gorgeous. So maybe I will try to give this palette more use if I can. So this is my ranking for my 2 Marc Jacobs palettes. So lastly, we have these E.l.f. shadow palettes over here. These bite-sized eyeshadow palettes. They are really cute. I bought them because I think that it's really useful if I want to travel with them. And they are relatively cheaper, so I won't be so heartbroken if one of the shades were to break while I travel. So the first one out of all these minis will be this palette over here. This is the Cream and Sugar palette. This is very gorgeous. This is actually surprisingly quite a good formula. I used it once and I really love it. It's very easy to wear and the formulas are really great. This shimmers over here really looks very stunning. It's quite comparable to the other eyeshadow formulas that I have. So I was really surprised by the quality in this palette. So this is a very wearable palette and is ranked number 1. The next palette that I have more use out of is this. This is the Mint to Be palette. It's a very unique color story. I really like this kind of minty looks. Just pop this in the crease And then this all over the lid, this to darken out the outer corner, and this in the inner corner. It's very nice, very cool, kind of minty look. I really like this palette. The next one over here is mint chocolate. I actually haven't opened up this palette yet, but if I were to rank, I think this one will be at the third one. These two have more or less the same color story. I feel this palette looks more like these two palettes mixed together to get this palette. I don't know, I just didn't really use this yet because I have lots of eyeshadow that I need to use more and give them more love. So I haven't opened this up. So this will be at my number 3. And this palette over here, same thing. I bought it, but I haven't used it. I heard that people say this is really a very good formula and a very beautiful color story. This is the Jalapeno palette. It's super stunning. It kind of gives me the vibes that I get from Natasha Denona Mini Gold palette, but this is much more brighter, much more greener. So I haven't used this yet. So, I might rank this at number 4 if I were to use it, if it's the same formula as the rest. Okay. And the last palette will be this Acai You. This shadow, however, is really not pigmented at all. It has hardly any pigment. I try to dig my brush inside. No matter how hard I dig inside to get a look, I find it super hard to get the colors out of it. I actually saw some YouTubers get quite a good look out of this palette. I'm not sure how they get some pigment out of this because I tried very hard and seriously I can't get any color out of this. So this is probably my least favorite eyeshadow out of all my entire collection. So that's it. This is the whole ranking video of my eyeshadow palettes. You can refer to my previous video for my Pat McGrath ranking if you haven't seen that. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy this long video of my ranking of my eyeshadow palettes. See you all in my next video. Do like and subscribe. Bye!